The new Obi-Wan series is out on Disney Plus right now, which obviously means it's loaded with visual effects. So here's the shot we're recreating, and here's our shot that we recreated. So how the did we do this shot? Well, let's talk about it.
Why are you cursing so much?
I was trying to think. I thought it'd be fun, but it's too much.
It's too much.
It's too much. So jumping right the in, the first okay. Jumping right into the effect and wasting no more motherfucking time, we're gonna For the environment and tower, we're gonna be using free stock photos and footage from pexels.com, all linked in the notes below. To start, we'll create a new comp in After Effects, make it 4K, and copy our chosen frame rate. We can paste this into the frame rate of each new stock footage clip that we're gonna be using. We'll start with this ocean drone footage and drop it into the comp. Scale it up, lowering the position slightly and trimming off the first few frames as the camera changes position. Then make the timeline around 4 seconds long. This footage is actually moving forward in Z space, but for our scene, we want a larger sense of scale and less camera movement, so we're going to use this other ocean clip placed above and masked with a high feather to keep the lower half in the shot. This also has some camera movement, so we'll keyframe position, scale, and rotation, and at the end of the timeline, alter these settings to make it feel more static. Using a curves effect, we can alter the brightness and color to blend better with the below layer. Another way to give a sense of larger scale with the ocean scene is having different horizontal patches of brightness. To do this, create an adjustment layer as well as a solid layer to act as our matte. Add a fractal noise to the solid, increase the brightness, and stretch the scale width. Set the adjustment layer to Luma Inverted Matte and use a curves effect to increase brightness in these areas. We can also use another adjustment layer above everything to grade the ocean more of a green tone like the original shot. Next, we're gonna make the sky a bit more moody, but if this were a shot with several people working on it, we'd really want kind of project management, which is where today's sponsor comes in. Assemble is a project management platform built from the ground up by filmmakers for filmmakers, and every aspect of Assemble was built through the eyes of a producer. So it's perfectly tailored for your project and for things like our recent project Sentry. Even though it was a very small crew throughout the process, staying organized is key, so this would have been great for that. You can set up tasks from pre-pro through post-production, assign tasks to people, share assets like animatics or lookbooks, and keep track of all of that with the calendar, which you can share with a public calendar link and sync to Google Cal, iCal, and Outlook. And in post, you have asset management and collaboration tools like frame-specific commenting on videos and version control. This is perfect for things like working with your visual effects artists like we did with that micro short. So in here you have a digital production binder. You can manage all your files and assets like the script, releases, storyboards, lookbooks, and so on. And now Assemble has added a powerful new feature, which is collaborative documents. With collaborative documents, you can create documents anywhere in your project and collaborate in real time for anything from meeting notes to scouting notes, basic scripts, and much more. And just like regular assets, you can quickly add new versions of documents to track changes over time, set the approval status, and leave feedback for your team. You can even add private feedback into the documents that is only visible to the people you want to see it. And finally, you can share these documents with anyone so that people can access them and contribute to them with no Assemble account required, which means your whole team can work together on Assemble without having to sign up for a new tool, which is huge. And what's even better is these documents are mobile friendly, so everyone can view them and update them on the go. So if you want to know more about that and check out our Filmright short film project template, you can jump on the 30-day free trial at the link below. Plus, if you use the coupon code Riot, you'll get an extra month for free.
Logo.
But back to that moody sky, we chose this stock footage and placed it above our scene, altering scale and position. We'll change the speed to 25 to add some faster movement and use a feathered mask to cut it off above the horizon. Adding a few more masks with higher feather values can help it feel more gradual. Using the tint and curves effects, we can alter the colors and saturation to match the rest of our scene. And because this shot doesn't really have too much motion, we can get away with recreating the tower building with 2D imagery rather than a 3D model. So we found this concrete bridge beam photo with tapered sides similar to the Obi-Wan building, and even with promote the same lighting direction. So dropping that into our comp, we'll use the pen tool and mask around this section, keeping a wider taper for the edges and the bottom. Now right-click Pre-Compose, move all attributes into the new comp and open. In this comp, using the region of interest, draw around the layer and then go to Composition and crop the comp to region of interest to make it the size. Back in our scene, we can use a corner pin effect and move the top left and right points closer to the center to warp it into a more triangular shape. The only issue is these bolts are being stretched, so jumping back into the tower comp, we can double-click our layer and use the clone stamp tool to paint these out. In our scene, we will scale and position the tower and use the tint and curves effect again to make the color closer match the dark look of the original. You can also use adjustment layers in the tower comp with masks to add darker or lighter areas. To recreate this middle section, we will pre-comp again as our tower final comp, create a new solid and draw a cutout section in the lower part of the tower, then set the pre-comp to alpha matte. For the base, we use this free stock image placed below, scaling and positioning to line up with our gap and mask this section out, then using the tint and curves effect to color correct. For the mid section, we duplicated the tower and placed below, deleted the corner pin effect and lowered the brightness slightly. We scaled it down and cut out a section, then masked another section below, increasing the feather and lowering mask opacity to feel more like a reflection or shadow. For smaller details, we masked out a couple pillar sections from stock photos and placed them around the rest of this area, making sure the light direction faces screen right, and again used the tint and curves effect, eventually giving us this. Back in our scene, we can use an adjustment layer below the tower and mask to match for a reflection, increase the mask feather, and use a curves effect to darken this area. For water interaction around the base of the tower, we found some more stock footage and masked sections to best fit around the structure, using curves to crush the surrounding water to black and setting the blending mode to screen. Then we can use a tint to give a grayish green color to closer match the original. For this stock clip in particular, we use the liquify tool to warp this into a straighter edge, which we can then line up with the front of the tower base. At this point, we rendered out our scene and brought it into a new comp. In the original shot, we can see some cloud atmosphere, which the camera is pushing through, so we'll create a new camera using the 35mm preset. And we have some stock photos of clouds that we can use by making them a 3D layer and using key light to key out the blue sky and a tint to make them a darker gray to fit the scene. We built up a bunch of different layers of clouds placed at various distances from the camera, and some with darker tints and variety. We're going to keyframe the camera position at the first frame, then move to the last and change the Z position value to push the camera forward. For the spaceship, we bought this model from Turbo Squid, which felt like a similar size, and we'll create a new solid layer and apply Element 3D. In the Custom Layers, Custom Texture dropdown, we can add our scene render, then inside Element, change the environment to this custom layer. We'll import the model and apply its materials, tweaking reflectivity and the gloss material slightly. To add lights at the back, we can use cube models placed and scaled in these sections of the ship, and in the materials, we can increase illumination. Back in After Effects, under the Group 1 Particle Look dropdown, we'll increase the size and create a group null. We can then use this null to animate the ship. First, we'll move these layers to start about a second into the shot, then rotate the null to face away from camera. Move to the end of the timeline and change the null position to place the ship in its final position near the tower and set a keyframe. Then move to the start and change position to have the ship begin above and behind the camera. These handles can help curve the position path rather than it being completely linear. You can also change views to the side or top to get a better idea of how the path looks. We also keyframed rotation and easy ease them to have the angle change over time. In render settings under physical environment, we lowered the lighting influence and increased the gamma, and under lighting, we turned the brightness to 0, then added a new parallel light positioned off screen right with decreased intensity. This affects our 3D cloud layer, so in the layer material options, we need to disable lights and shadows, which we can then copy and paste to the other cloud layers. Using a curves effect on our ship, we can alter brightness and contrast to match our scene, and in output, increase the sampling. Enable motion blur, and if you get any obvious shutter samples when it's close to the camera, under render settings, you can keyframe and increase motion blur samples for those frames. We'll duplicate the layer to isolate the lights by changing output to illumination and setting the blending mode to screen. We can delete the curves and add a glow effect. We use Red Giant Optical Glow with a blue color to match the original. For some extra motion, we wanted a bit of cloud dispersion for when the spaceship flies through, so we we use the Fog at Camera 5 asset from Action VFX for the last few seconds where it disperses. We can then enable time remapping and use a few keyframes with frame blending enabled to have it start slow, then time ramp fast when the ship flies by. To add some camera shake, we can pre-comp everything and keyframe the position manually, then scale up to fill the frame and enable motion blur. We used assets from our Vision Lens stock pack for when the ship lights are close to the lens. We set to screen, tinted them to blue to match, and keyframe the opacity to lower over a few frames. For final touches, we used some more glow, Video Copilot's heat plugin to add some propulsion, some chromatic aberration, and a final grade to closely match the original shot, giving us this. That's it for today. Like I said, all the links for everything we use are in the notes below, and if you're not subscribed, consider doing that and hit the bell so you're notified when we put up new content. And until next time, don't forget to write, shoot, edit, repeat.